Hey folks, Mike here with a follow-up video to my previous unRAID setup. I've been using this for about 2 weeks now, and I figured it would be a nice time to do, just a quick video to go over the one issue I had, some of the configuration, some of the stuff I was looking to do, and kind of show off what 80-90% of my apps would look like, and kind of give you an idea why I wound up choosing this over going back to something like VMware, building a bunch of virtual machines and going through it that way. Or, rolling my own OS and trying to put virtualization stuff on top like KVM and whatnot. But anyways, first things first, a couple changes here, right? The $60 basics license, it's good for 6 devices. So your parity and caching drives are included. So I have 4 data, a cache, and a parity. You always need a parity. So, at most you're going to have 5 data drives with the basic license. That $60 US winds up being about $80 Canadian. So it's expensive, but not that expensive, especially if you consider your time being worth anything. In my case, if I say, I don't know, my time is worth $20 an hour, let's say, and a normal Linux server would take me about 12 hours to set up, and this one only took me 2. Well, I spent $200 of my time to set up a Linux server, so the $80 for a license to do it in 2 hours is absolutely worth it for me, right? Sometimes it is worth spending money on some of these things, despite the fact that I used open source stuff for 10, 15 plus years. I've tried a lot of different setups in the past, and none of them have left me as happy about this one as this one has, because it's been so simple and straightforward, minus the issue of the caching, of course, which is one problem I had. Other than that, I do have an update here, which we didn't do last time, hence why the uptime is a bit low. Simple as just, you could click on the release list as well, but it's simple as just clicking the check update, you do the update, and then you reboot whenever you're ready to apply it. 10-minute process maybe? About 10 minutes for me. 9 of those minutes being the actual downloading of the update. It's not a very big update, it was only like 150 meg I think, but I have really slow internet, so that was surprisingly quick for me anyways. As for the caching drive, so that's the only place I had a bit of an issue, and most of the issue was down to me not necessarily, me doing a slight configuration mistake and also not quite understanding how it worked. So there's a couple of things you need to know. First of all, the minimum free space. I did do a slight mistake here, and I think I set 200 meg instead of 2 gig, which is what I wanted to do based off the example. But I bumped it to 5 gig because I have a better understanding. For my setup, I need a bigger buffer. So the way this works is basically, say you have less than 5 gig space left, it will not write to the cache drive, it will write straight to the array instead. So that's an important thing to remember. The other thing you have to remember is when it writes to the cache drive, it does not immediately transfer to the array afterwards, or it does not keep it in the caching drive as a temporary file and copy it to the array. Instead, it writes to the cache drive and it remains on the cache drive until the mover, which is scheduled for every 24 hours, physically moves that file off the cache drive to the array. So think of it as a cut and paste kind of deal afterwards. So that's kind of important to know, because when I first started using this, I noticed that the cache drive wasn't being used much, and then I realized, that kind of makes sense because I asked it to copy 2 terabytes of data, so that's kind of normal. I've only got 64 gig caching, but later on, I noticed my caching was always at like 60% usage. And that was kind of my second mistake here. I had set all of my shares to use the caching. Now the problem is app data. App data is okay, and my main storage is okay because this is my share where I do a lot of the stuff. app data is okay because this is all the temporary files for Docker. The temporary files are not very big, but Docker itself and libvirt, which is the virtualization, those don't need to be on the SSD. There's no performance benefit for me to having them on there. Same as the ISO images that I use to initially set up the virtual machines, and the virtual machines themselves, which is domains here, where my virtual machines reside. That kind of contributed to the fact that, yeah, I always had a good 60% of my SSD used because my virtual machines sat on them. So I believe I had set it to prefer as well. So I disabled the caching. I don't need caching on those things. They don't do a whole lot. Once they're fired up, they don't do a whole lot. It would be kind of good to actually have them on the cache because then my hard drives can spin down because these things do occasionally access the hard drive. But on the flip side, I copy enough data that I kind of need at least my two primary storage drives to be up and running. So yeah, all in all, there's definitely a good part of that, which was my problem, my configuration mistake. There's also a part of it of not necessarily having enough guidance in the operating system itself. As soon as I looked at documentation, it all made sense, right? It was one of these I read for maybe 5 minutes. I understood how it worked. It made a lot more sense to me, and it wound up solving my issue. Having said that, it's one of those things. I've used caching before on Windows with the Intel Rapid Storage Tech. AMD actually introduced something like that in the new X470 chipset. But the idea was it's kind of like those SSD hard drives, right? So it's basically a giant buffer for the hard drive itself. I was under the impression the caching here worked that way, but actually it doesn't. So keep that in mind. You can also schedule the mover to happen every hour instead, or every 3 whatever hours instead of every 24. So that would give you a bit more redundancy. That would give you a nice buffer to quickly copy to the server. But if you're working on files a lot, again, it comes down to you can configure shares differently as well, right? If you have more of a working folder environment where you're working with big files and you kind of want to have them accessible pretty often, you can make another storage or another share that's configured that way. Right, so for instance, my time machine stuff for my Mac, hell no, I don't want that thing cached. But my main storage itself, definitely want caching on that. So that way, when I wind up doing big backups and stuff like that, yeah, the SSD can absorb that 20 gig or so every week, and then later on it'll move it back to the hard drives, or back to the array rather. So that's why these triangles show up. So by tomorrow morning, if nothing else changes, they'll go back to green. The other part here, Docker, I talked about that in the previous video. I have no clue how it works. I had no clue how to do anything. I started doing a bit of research, and I quickly came to the conclusion that the community applications plugin will make my life super easy. So it's literally as simple as plop the URL, click install. You get the community apps, which shows up as a tab here. And here's a random app. So say you wanted a VPN server or something, right? You see some examples here of torrent applications combined with a VPN. But you have straight open VPN, client, server, whatever. So you have that kind of stuff. If you want your media server, you can also look up for media servers. There's a lot of options there as well. These are all Docker images. So if you wanted your XBMC, or it's Kodi these days, right? You got a couple options. Different people have made different packages. But as simple as choose one, click download, and away you go. So I usually used, let's see if we can find it, tiny RSS. This is a package. This is something I've not installed yet. I tend to use quite a bit because I have my own RSS reader server, if you will. Google Reader is great. This winds up working a little bit better for me. I don't want to pay for services. I prefer having it local. It's a little more flexible. And yeah, I click the download. I can choose a port. So if port 80 is already being used, I can redirect to, say, 8000. 8000 would redirect to 80, which is what tiny RSS is looking for. And that's it. Except for this one here specifically, mind you. This one needs an external database, but yeah, apply, and that's all you need to do. It really is that simple. It shows up in your Docker here. And yeah, if we look at, say, well, you can see here what you need to know. So if we look at JDownloader, it saves to /output, and /output is mapped to my main storage /downloads. So if we go to my share here, main storage, downloads, so that's where /output points to. So if I make a subfolder, it'll be within this downloads folder. That's how it works. Also, you can see what's on what, which is really cool. So there's stuff on the cache drive, which is actually what JDownloader is working on right now. So if we go back to Docker, right, it's really simple. You open your web UI. You don't see it up there. You can see, my F1 race or not F1, but my World Endurance Championship. They put out the videos. I think it's a month after or a week after. I'd have to look at the calendar. I actually don't remember when the 6 hours happened, but yeah, you can see why I like to have my JDownloader stuff. I cannot stream some of these videos very reliably at 1080p, but if I can download it and let it do its thing, yeah, I can enjoy it. I can watch it on high resolutions. I don't have to worry about other people using the internet. We've got a central server to deal with that. So yeah, that's how Docker works. What you're missing here is I'm accessing it from 7807 on the top of the bar, which internally redirects to 5800 or 5900, depending on the interface you want. So that's kind of an important thing as well. And that's what's really cool about this Docker stuff is it's aware where it has to redirect ports and whatnot, which is pretty cool. So I also have Deluge for BitTorrent stuff because like my World Endurance Championship, certain other motorsports are not available. I can't. There's no easy way for me to watch it, right? Even if I wanted to give them money to watch it, I can't. So, we have to use BitTorrent for that kind of stuff. But on the other hand, Linux distros, I like to try out different Linux distros, other softwares and stuff. There's a lot of other, legitimate things that you can download from BitTorrent, which definitely make use of that because my internet's really freaking slow. So both of these tools are super valuable to me, just to be able to, get some files and stuff fairly reliably. On a similar note, Syncthing is one of my backup solutions for a lot of very important things. Syncthing, if you've used, I used to use Dropbox way back then, when Dropbox was still fairly new. It was a really cool tool. You can upload stuff to their cloud. You had about 2 gig of storage, I believe, and it could synchronize across all of your devices. So it was tremendously useful because I work on a lot of stuff between my laptop and my desktop, so it's a great way to keep them synchronized. Even in college, heck, even in high school, really, it was a great way to collaborate with other people because you can also share, folders and stuff between each other. So you could both work on stuff actively, and it worked pretty well. Of course, Google Drive came around, or rather, Google Docs came around. That's kind of a thing in college, I believe. I don't think it was around before that. But then these days, everyone uses that. Anyways, all that to say, yeah, eventually Dropbox, obviously file size limitation, or rather storage space limitation. They also had a tendency to lose their password databases. I think they've lost it 3 times, 4 times maybe. I feel at least twice. It's happened at least twice. So, it's really hard to have confidence in a service that can't seem to get their security right. So I moved over to BitTorrent Sync, which is Resilioed, I believe, right now. The nice advantage of that is you're not depending on the cloud, right? If I have my laptop and my desktop in the same room, why should I wait for something to be uploaded to the cloud just to get it back locally? Like, it had a local sync, but it only did it once it was up in the cloud, which seemed kind of stupid. So Resilio fixed a lot of those issues. Also, it just use your own devices. You don't have a cloud, you don't really have anything to rely on. But the name change came with a lot of commercialization, a lot of features being kind of held back. And so Syncthing is the free open source version, which in a lot of ways I think it works a little bit better. So yeah, that's the 3 basic applications I tend to use a lot. The only missing thing is the tiny RSS, or another one really, just an RSS feed server, and I probably have to spin up a database as well for it, because the 2 packages available don't seem to include a database, which, fine by me. I could do it all with Docker, right? In terms of virtual machines, I have my unified management system. While there is Ubiquiti Dockers, there's none for this just yet. So yeah, I have my Ubiquiti stuff on a virtual machine, which not much to see. It's command line. That's all there is. And similarly, I have another Ubuntu box for VPN stuff, which I could do an OpenVPN Docker. However, this also has some DNS filtering in it and a couple other little tweaks. So can't really do a normal Docker image for that, which is fine. This does a little bit more work anyways. It's not ever particularly powerful, right? Both of these have 2 cores. They're only using 3 gig of RAM out of my 8 gig. And I might have another virtual machine or 2 for Windows and a couple other things. Yeah, that's unRAID. That's kind of my setup. That's why I like Docker, first of all. These guys are all independent. They're all in their own small container, 1-click install. So if there's other little applications or projects that seem to be popular, I could definitely fill in a blank very, very easily with those. But on the flip side, I've got my traditional virtual machines as well, which is something I've used a lot in the past, since this server setup is replacing an ESXi server. So yeah, it's not like virtual machines are a new thing for me. I was kind of going in that direction, but I really started looking up on Docker, and holy crap, that's also cut down on a lot of stuff. As a side note, yes, most of these things can be done on a single machine. I've tried that in the past as well. The problem you start running into is certain packages need certain things, and then you start mixing and matching, and then yeah, things are not very happy. So having the Docker stuff simplifies my life a lot. I could do this on a normal Linux as well. I've never done it though. So, for me at least, this is a nice introduction on how to do it. It seems pretty straightforward and really easy. But how to get Docker itself running on, say, an Ubuntu box, that's another project for another day. But filed that said and done, this was $80 or $60 US, I guess. And it really did cut down on a lot of hours and a lot of just useless overhead by doing a lot of virtual machines as well. Not only that, much higher storage efficiency, like I talked about in the previous video. Normally I would have only had 2 terabytes in a mirror, and two 500 gigs in the mirror. So I've only had 2.5 terabytes to work with. My caching drive would have actually been my OS drive as well. So in this case, I've got 5 terabytes of storage because I did buy an extra 3 terabyte drive. But yeah, my old server setups only had, I say that 2.5. Realistically, my old servers only had 2 terabytes of storage because my caching drive had the OSs. My 500 gig mirror had kind of temporary drives, and all my main storage, my main 2 terabytes had like a NAS of some sorts running on that, and then all the other virtual machines, all their temporary data or all their data would drop onto the 500s before being moved to the NAS OS of sorts that I had. Because a 60 gig SSD, you're not going to fit the dozen or so OSs I used to run. You'll put some stuff on the SSD for the important ones, but most of them sat on the 500s. But yeah, today with this new setup, like we've got 4 terabytes of usable plus another terabyte here, which is pretty decent upgrade, I'd say, despite having the extra 3 terabyte drive. So I think that's about it. That's kind of the basics of unRAID. I think it's a fantastic setup. It's not particularly complicated. It's pretty straightforward. It's very very flexible. There's a lot of things I still would like to do, and it enables me to try out a lot of packages. Right, like I've kind of looked at XBMC in the past, and which is now Kodi. But I didn't really want to go around and set up all the stuff for that. For a while, I was looking at doing a music streaming server of sorts as well. I believe AirSonic was what it was. And it was the same problem. It was just one of these, okay, a lot of these configurations don't seem too bad, but I don't really want to go in and start configuring stuff and breaking stuff, right? Because when I ran in a monolithic kind of OS setup, because nothing is containerized or separated or whatever. And to be fair, Docker didn't really exist when I did that kind of setup back then. That's why I moved to ESXi for the last that's why I moved to Proxmox, then ESXi, because it allowed me to do that. It allowed me to build, an operating system, but Docker takes out the operating system part and just containers the applications themselves, which is really cool. But yeah, anytime I have some neat little apps that I might read about, I'm literally 1 or 2 clicks away of installing them, which it's super convenient, really. As long as someone else has done it, right? That's what you're at least the way I'm set up here. I'm depending on this plugin, which, to be fair, it has a lot of stuff, so pretty happy about that. But yeah, that's it. That's it for now. Give it a try, right? They give you a 30-day trial. I don't have a referral code or anything. I bought the license. I think it's a cool piece of software, and so I decided to make a video about it. And yeah, definitely do give it a look. I do hope that someone else comes up with something kind of similar, right? There's definitely a hole in the market, I feel, for this kind of OS, for someone to build a free open source version, because while free NAS or NAS for free work really well, they're very focused on the NAS part, and I find they're a little too complicated in some ways. Because for me, I don't need a lot of flexibility. I just need, hey, I want to share. I want a Samba share. I want an AFP share for my Mac, though I don't have the AFP enabled for this one. And I want accounts. I don't have other users yet. I'll get around to that eventually, but that's all I need. Oh, and FTP. FTP is important as well, which is a global setting, I believe. Yeah. And that's all I need. FTP, yes, with me. I don't need any other configurations. I know there's a lot of specific things that some people need, but I don't. I like it simple like that. If I do need the advanced configurations, I can do them anyways. But yeah, this has been the least painful NAS setup yet, and I've been pretty happy about it. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper than using one of these Synologies or Drobos or whatever out there as well. So it's been a pretty good win-win. And with that said, this is Mike here. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.